be me. Protecting vehicle privacy using dummy events. The authors of this paper, Nahed Al-Nahash, just passed her court exam, congratulations. And so she worked on this, she's the lead author of this paper. I'm a fellow doctoral student in her group. And our fearless leader, Sage Advisor, is Dr. Fu. And we have also colleagues from Cleveland State University, Dr. Xu. We're going to put this together. I know some of you in this room know what a vehicle network is. But you do? Wow, good for you. I know that some people probably aren't that familiar with it. Your car, you may have bought a new car, it may already be equipped with a router inside of it. If you don't, if you have an older vehicle, it might not have it in there, but eventually the plan is for every vehicle on the road to have a transmitter that transmits its precise location so that vehicles can avoid colliding with one another, even if they're not in line of sight. Sensors usually require a line of sight, and cell phone or other types of technology is too slow, latency is too slow. So we need to have a fast way of improving the vehicle networks. We need to improve safety. Now, I should tell you, my background is in civil engineering. So I take a little bit of my undergraduate degree is in civil engineering, so I take a civil engineering mindset toward this. I'm thinking of the traffic. Somebody says a collision, I don't think a network collision. I think a traffic collision, but anyway. So anyway, I think you guys all get the idea of a vehicle network. These things are going to be networked together. These things are primarily hypothetical. The way that we test things is through simulation. We don't test them with real vehicles, obviously. They're expensive. And they have not been deployed yet. Ann Arbor's got one of the largest actual test beds for this. Dying to go down and check it out. So just keep in mind that this is coming, but it doesn't exist yet. Now, what's the problem that we're trying to figure out? We're trying to figure out how can we protect privacy if every single vehicle on the road is transmitting its precise position 10 times per second. How do we make sure nobody knows where it is? This is a complicated problem. So we can see here in the diagram, we're not considering cell towers. Please, I hope this thing here works. We're not considering cell towers. We're not considering people that are, camped up next to a car. We're not considering that. We're not considering somebody who might have control over this local antenna, which we call an RSU, a roadside unit. We're not considering that. We're considering the guy who's sitting at the desk of a location-based service. Now, you may use location-based services on your phone, like Google Maps, Google Navigation. It's telling you where you are. Well, these things, of course, are going to come to the vehicles, and the problem is, how do we protect privacy from these administrators? This is the problem that we're trying to work on. Why is this problem important? There are laws against invasion of privacy, and Katz versus United States set the precedent for reasonable expectation of privacy. We don't know how this law will apply in vehicles. We still don't even know how it will apply for cell phones. Al Franken from Minnesota, the senator, has been trying to put legislation in place to set laws on privacy. But the legal community is not sure about privacy for vehicles. The business world has published a lot of information, and they are always talking about this in conferences. What's going to be the competitive selling point? Would it be more competitive to sell something that can maintain privacy? If that is the case, we don't know if that is important yet. And then, of course, the other question is, and you all have to ask yourselves this, when is it appropriate for a location-based service to know who it is at what point at what time? And if you think about it, a location-based service could sell that data as another service. So they sell you the navigation service, then they sell companies, see who's going to a cancer doctor, see who's going to a job interview, employees that are going to your competitor's location. So that could be a service if we don't have some kind of technical solution that you may not be able to prevent that. So it's an important issue. I mean, some people here may not think privacy is important. You may have all your whole lives on Facebook. Hey, that's fine with me. But for us, we care. For us in the privacy community, we care. Now, how is this problem solved right now? The way this problem is typically solved is through a thing called spatial cloaking. What happens is you set up a proxy server somewhere, a computer in between you and Google, say, and that thing will pick 3 or 4 people that are using the same location-based service and give these multiple locations at the same time with fake IDs. So the cloaking system will prevent, theoretically, the LDS from knowing which one's which. They'll know you're out there somewhere, but they may not know which one is you. The problem with spatial cloaking is it requires a trusted third party. If you're willing to trust a third party with that data, why not just trust the LDS? I mean, it's a question. Another problem with the LDS is if you turn on your car and the location-based service is automatically activated, it's going to know your address, right? Because it can go back and cross-reference the beginning point of the trajectory and say, hey, that's your house, right? So that's a problem with past defenses. Other defenses assume, typically, this is the real thing we're trying to solve, is they assume a mobility pattern of a cell phone user. Most of the time, if you read these papers and literature, it's how does a cell phone user walk around, right? Well, cars move really fast and usually in one direction. And if you're behind one guy, you stay behind that guy for a long time, right? So the mobility model for a car and for other kinds of vehicles, trains, all kinds of vehicles are included in this. They're not the same as what's in the published literature. So Naheed and I decided we would take a look, instead of these squiggly lines of where people move, we're going to look at this in terms of a vehicle mobility pattern. So our contribution is to take another author's work, and you, Penny and Lee, in the papers cited in our paper, and change it up so it looks more like a vehicle situation. That's basically what we did. They have a thing called a random rotation. They had I forgot what the other one was, random pattern and a random rotation. I don't know. Cars don't move in random patterns. I mean, unless somebody's really off. They shouldn't move in random patterns, theoretically. So this random rotation, the idea is that you'd move the trajectory at different angles and hopefully fake out the eavesdropper. Now, you can probably imagine that if you're an automotive engineer, unless you're probably going to be thinking about safety. That's going to be very high in your priority list. All this other stuff we can talk about privacy. If we don't get safety, the thing is not worth anything. If you're a network engineer, usually when you sit around and you talk about performance. How efficient is it? I heard a question from the last author was just, how much data you're going to be storing, that sort of thing. So we have to ask ourselves in the privacy world, how anonymous are we? How concealed are we? And the 3 measures that are used in the paper that we use as a foundation paper, we have short-term disclosure, long-term disclosure, and distance deviation. And I'll explain those quickly here. The short-term disclosure is just over a very short time frame. What's the likelihood if somebody had a small set of information, including dummy events, fake times and locations, and real ones? What's the likelihood of an eavesdropper successfully identifying the vehicle? Or which trajectory or which position is the real one? This equation is basically average the number of possible locations. Now it may be that at time 3, let's suppose you have 3 cars, A, B, and C, and at time 3, A and B are in the same location. Well then, you only have 2 possible locations that the real car can be in if there's only 3. Right? So that's what this DI is. But basically it's just an average of all the different, the set sizes at each time. Short-term disclosure. Long-term disclosure is, they don't look at it in terms of times positions, they look at it in terms of the entire trajectory. So if you have a car that went this way, you have another car that went that way, you have another car that went this way, which one is the real trajectory of the guy you're trying to target? And I don't know how much time we have, but basically this is the number of trajectories that overlap. Now, if I've got 2 trajectories going like this, This is one and this is one. One's real, one's fake. Two. There's two possibilities, right? But if they're going like this, and they meet at this particular time 3, I've got 1, 2, 3, and 4 possibilities. So the more overlap, the more privacy. Here's an example from their paper that shows the example of this. I think this audience is probably about that, so I'm just asking. The last one, and I think this is the most interesting one, is the distance deviation. Who cares how many positions you can confuse a person with if they're all close together, right? We want to make sure they're far apart. So a lot of these guys will measure the distance deviation of the average distance deviation between the real trajectory and the fake trajectory. And that's how they measure it using cell phones, and we're going to do the same thing using cars. Well, long story short, the head and I ran simulations on 20 vehicles over 50 by 50 grid, which is the same thing they did in the other paper, and we looked at the results and we were surprised to find out that if we did not confine cars to roadways, in other words, if we did this model the same way as the original authors had done it, we'd get the results like this. Basically, the short-term, the short distance, no, that's not what it is. Short-term disclosure, that's what I was thinking, sorry. Short-term disclosure are close with each other. Long-term disclosures were whatever they were. But we found that when we forced vehicles to be on roads with these 90-degree things, we made a Manhattan grid so that they had the cars had to be on roads. There was a lot more overlap. And what does overlap do?
Reduce.
Gives us more privacy, reduces the probability that they're going to catch you. So we're like, oh my gosh, look at this. It's not astronomical, but the chances went from 4% to 1%, or from 16% down to 10%, depending on if you had this road thing. I've got the signal here. But bottom line, we go through these numbers here, but the results by using a road model, by making this rotation system that they had come up with and enforcing it using this Manhattan grid, resulted in maybe double to triple the long-term disclosure without changing the short-term disclosure that much. The distance deviation is also very similar. So, in conclusion, this random rotation scheme that you people came up with, it may work in vehicle context, but in order for it to work effectively, we need to be conforming to the road patterns. It'll work a little bit better to conform to road patterns. Sorry, I didn't have time for questions. I'm sorry about that, guys. That's good.
Several minutes. So, do we have any questions? I have a question. Actually, 2 questions. First, when you said you simulated it, what was your simulating? What does it entail?
What does it entail?
Yeah, what does it simulate?
It simulates the positions. We have a true car,
Okay.
which we just arbitrarily choose a true path, and we create multiple paths. And so each one of these would be the number of dummy trajectories. So 25 dummies or 5 dummies. And of course, the more dummies you have, each one of those is going to be, a transmission somewhere. The more congestion you're going to get in the network performance area. So the idea is that whatever the level of dummy trajectories, we're getting a little bit better.
So you knew the road geometries a priori.
Right.
Okay. So yeah, like if this is promising and then it proliferates into vehicles, how would you take advantage of the different?
That's great. And it is in the paper, but I wasn't sure how much time I was going to get. But the idea is, when you're driving, most people drive to the same places over and over again. So you can start to develop patterns. Even if you've never been to an area, you can use the broadcast positions of other vehicles to determine what is a real possible trajectory. So sure, obviously roads don't always go perfectly like this, but you can probably, over time, build a better and better database without downloading the whole big thing. Over time, get a better and better database of where you can rotate. It wouldn't necessarily be 90 degrees. Yeah, you'd have to keep some, there would be a storage cost.
Okay. That was, I mean,
Yeah, it's not perfected yet by a long stretch.
excellent. Okay, very good. This guy's prompt, he fit us perfect.
That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to do TED Talk, you know.
He's a good role model. Okay, nice job.